Hey there, so I'm going to run you through the example problem that you can find up here in question help to see if maybe I can help it make a little bit more sense to you. And I'm going to hit continue because you said you already know how to find the range. So I'm going to go here to where it says standard deviation. And I think a good first step would be to help you make sense of what these symbols mean, because I know sometimes that can be overwhelming. So it says the first step for finding standard deviation is to find the mean of the set of data. So this X with the line over it is simply the math symbol for saying mean. Then the way that so when it says the mean equals, it's getting ready to tell you over here on this side of the equation is how you actually find the mean. So in order to find the mean, this part of the equation is sigma x. Sigma is just the fancy math way of saying add all the numbers together. That is all it is saying to do. You're literally just going to take the numbers that you're given and you're going to be adding them together. N is the way of writing how many numbers you have. So for example, because there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 numbers here in the data set, in this case, N is going to be 5. So in other words, we're going to take all of the numbers, we're going to add them together to get the sigma x, to get the sum, and then we're going to divide by the number of numbers that we have, which in this case is 5. So I'm going to take care of that by adding all the numbers together. I'm going to add 13 plus 7 plus 4 plus 10 plus 11. And when I did that, I got 45. So I added all those numbers together and I got 45. So I'm going to take that 45 and divide it by the number of numbers that I have in the data set. So 45 divided by 5 is 9. So the first step for finding standard deviation is to find that mean. It's just another way of saying average, which is basically the number that represents the middle of the numbers up here. You'll notice some of them are bigger than 9, some of them are smaller than 9. 9 represents that average. So if you add them all together, divide by 5, that's what you get. So I'm going to get rid of my writing here and just double check and make sure I didn't make some kind of mistake. Nope, so I got the same thing that the example problem did. See how they added everything together? Got 45. Then they divided by 5, so they also got a mean of 9. So I know I'm on the right track. So the first step, all I did was find the mean. I added all the numbers together and I divided by how many numbers I have. Okay, here is where it starts to get a little bit more complicated. I'm going to zoom in here a little bit. So when you're finding the standard deviation, which is what we're trying to do, standard deviation basically means how spread out is that number from the middle. And even though, or how far spread out is it from the average? So we got that average, we got that mean of 9. So this is a very simplistic way to explain it. We're basically trying to figure out how far away is each number from 9. So let's figure that out now. So this middle column is telling you to take the number. That's why we have just regular old X. See, there's just our regular old numbers that we started off with in our data set. And we're going to take each number, and because it says X minus the mean. So you're going to take each number and you're going to subtract the mean. So the mean, of course, which we just figured out is 9. So we're going to take every one of these numbers and we're going to subtract it from 9. So 13 minus 9. So I'm going to go through here and do all this subtraction. I'm going to pause the video. You go ahead and do that subtraction. Great, so now I'm back. So again, all I did was I took each individual number, 13, 7, 4, the original numbers in our data set, and I subtracted the mean. So I subtracted that average mean of 9 from each of them. And so I got a total. In this case, I got 4, -2, -5, 1, and 2. So the next step is, now that I know how far away each number is from the mean, I'm going to take this answer to the subtraction problem that I just did. Okay, so here's all those answers, which is what this means. It means what was the answer to the subtraction problem that I got. And I am going to square it. That means that little exponent that I just pointed to on the outside means I'm going to multiply each of these numbers by itself twice. So I'm going to take 4 times 4. I'm going to multiply all these numbers together. So again, where I got that from, I got it because I subtracted each number from the mean, first of all, right? Then I took the answer to that subtraction problem and I'm going to multiply it by itself twice. That's what that exponent means. So I'm going to get the answer to each of those. So again, all I did was multiply each of those numbers by each other twice. So now I've got that set of numbers right there. I am going to now take my writing off the screen just to double check myself, make sure that the book and I are on the same page, just so that you can see that too, kind of like how the book walks you through the example. So I'm going to click, and then, yep, as you can see, these are all the exact same numbers that I just got a second ago. So now I'm going to hit continue. We're going to go through the next set of directions. So it says that the next step is to determine the sum of the values in that squared column. So in other words, remember, sum means that you just add things together. So it says determine the sum of all the numbers in that column. So we're literally going to take 16, 4, 25, 1, and 4, and we're going to add them together. Okay, so I added all of those together and I got 50. So let me take my writing off the screen and make sure I got the same answer that the book did. Yep. Book, added them all together and got 50 as well. So again, the last step I just did was I just added all those numbers together. So then the next step is, so in the step where we found the mean, we added all the numbers together in the original first step. We added all the numbers together and divided by how many numbers we had. So if you'll recall, we added them all, we got 45, and we divided by how many numbers we had. Our final, or not our final step actually, but our next step here is similar, but it's a little bit different. Now that I added all those numbers together in the column, and I got 50. We are going to divide 50, but we're not going to divide it by the number of numbers that we have. We're going to divide it by n minus 1. So you're going to take the number of numbers that you have and divide it by 1 fewer. So instead of dividing by 5, we're going to divide it by 4. And if I'm not mistaken, that should get us 12.5. Let me check the book, make sure. Yep. So that got us 12.5. And then finally, there's a lot of steps to this, I know. The very last step is to take what we call the square root. So we just took all the numbers from that column. So just let me remind you what we did again. So we added together all these numbers and we got 50. Then we took that sum and we divided it. Instead of dividing it by 5 numbers, you always divide it by 1 less than the number of numbers that you have. So we did 50 divided by 4 and got 12.5. The final step is to do something called a square root, which is this little guy that looks kind of like a jacked up division symbol a little bit. Your calculator will do that for you. Okay, so you literally just need to put in your calculator 12.5 and then hit the square root button, and it'll give you a crazy decimal that you just round to the nearest hundredth. If I put it into my calculator, I ended up getting 3.5355 and a bunch of stuff. Traditionally, we round it to the second decimal place. That's the hundredths place. So that's why that 5 made me round that up. So that's 3.54. And thus, we finally have the standard deviation.